Accessibility in Terraria and accessibility suggestions. Before diving into this epic video, I must first share a little bit of history. When our Lord Chippy shared the 1.4.5 spoiler of a stress ball accessory that auto-attacks, I realized that RE Logic had accidentally made an accessibility feature. So, I made a post with some fun minor accessibility suggestions. The obvious next step was to write a 25-page Google Doc that I continually update, and then, after that of course, I addressed the man Red himself with what some might call a threat, but what I would more accurately describe as facts. And in that post, I promised him a good time with this video. So thank you, Red, for sharing my paper with the team, and like I said in the post, this is a dream come true and means more than I can say. If you are a player and want to add your own accessibility suggestions, I made a Terraria forum specifically for that purpose called Forum for Disability Accessibility Suggestions, which is also linked below. Please note that I am still updating the paper. I will always update the paper even after 1.4.5 comes out, and if I die, I'll just tell my brother to do it, so please continue to make suggestions. Also, don't be afraid to suggest things that you're not 100% sure are accessibility related. The community is safe and welcoming, and either you will write and will be added to the paper, or someone will kindly help with or create a separate game suggestion thread in the Terraria forums. Warnings. There are 4 sections in this video with flashing lights. The first one occurs here and ends here. The second section occurs at this point in the video and ends at this time. The third section happens here and ends at this time. The fourth part occurs at this time and stops here. I have pasted the text during these sections in the description of the video so you don't have to search through the whole paper to find them. I also have a minor warning for trypophobia. I don't know if it's actually triggering, but I simply don't want to cause a bad time for anyone. It occurs here and ends here. Again, the text spoken during that section is pasted below. There will of course be warnings shown right before those moments, and the ends will all be signaled by this ding noise. I just wanted to give a clear and specific warning at the beginning for those who need it. Introduction. Terraria is my absolute favorite game. Whenever I get asked what my favorite game is, I don't even have to think about it. I just say Terraria automatically. I have been able to see the game grow over the years, not just in terms of general content and improvements, but alongside and with suggestions from a passionate community. It is so amazing to see both useful and outright wacky suggestions get implemented, and for them to be taken equally seriously. If we can ask for stackable terrariums, be given literal poo blocks, or be graced with the delightful hell that is the Get Fixed Boy seed, it is really not that out there to ask for increased accessibility options. I am not here to complain. I am here to celebrate an already awesome game by encouraging it to be even more awesome. My partner literally proposed to me while we were playing Terraria. I have no words that aren't love for this game. So I ask that this discussion on accessibility and accessibility suggestions is taken seriously. I also want to surprise you with the accessibility options Terraria already has that you never would have guessed. You don't have to be disabled to benefit from accessibility features. They help everyone. Misconceptions about accessibility. It is important to spend some dedicated time to clear up some misconceptions about accessibility. For one thing, accessibility is far from the niche concern that people make it out to be, with an estimated population of 400 million disabled gamers worldwide. Accessibility benefits everyone, and there is a huge overlap between accessibility features and regular features, such as dark mode and the ability to change screen brightness and tone. So accessibility is not just about catering to specific disabilities, but providing customizations and accommodations for everyone to be able to play games in a fun and fulfilling way. With a vast diversity of disabilities, accessibility needs to be treated as a multifaceted issue that requires many different considerations. The Able Gamers Foundation identifies 4 major components to address: mobility, visual, hearing, and cognitive. Within mobility are aspects such as remapping keys, no precision needed, can play with only the keyboard, and difficulty levels. As seen with these concerns alone, accessibility can mean altering both physical controls and gameplay mechanics. It is the gameplay mechanics surrounding difficulty that often takes center stage when people take issue with accessibility options. But considering the fundamental changes in game experience between different devices and consoles, difficulty should really not be that taboo of a concern. Even before addressing disabilities specifically, difficulty itself has an inherently vast spectrum that cannot be understated. Genova Chen's article on flow in games discusses how players have different, quote, flow zones. In other words, each person has a different balance needed between challenge and abilities for maximum enjoyment. As seen from the graph, flow states vary even between hardcore and novice players, who could even be the same person at different times in their life. Chen writes, quote, "If the challenge is beyond that ability, the activity becomes so overwhelming that it generates anxiety. If the challenge fails to engage the player quickly loses interest and tends to leave the game." End quote. Important in this quote is not just the delicacy of the balance to create flow, but the 2 opposing outcomes that result in its failure: too difficult and too easy. This sentiment of too easy is also echoed in Jesper Juhl's chapter called What is Casual? He conducted surveys among, quote, casual and hardcore players to see what actually defines the 2 groups, which turns out to be nothing more than stereotypes. Contrary to popular stereotypes, quote, casual players have considerable game knowledge and enjoy difficulty. Juhl shares his finding that, quote, many of the surveyed players report a preference for difficult games. More players consider it worse for a game to be too easy than for it to be too hard. End quote. While it is unlikely the survey includes disabled players, the sentiment is still widely applicable. Accessible and easy are not the same thing, and while they can overlap, there is no correlation between them. An easy game that does not have colorblind conscious options can be impossible for an entire population. This is why it is important to stress game functionality in terms of physical controls and visuals and sounds alongside game mechanics. When looking at the flow model through the lens of a disabled player, the abilities axis does not necessarily mean the player's level of experience or competence, but their access to usable controls. Abilities should also only mean aspects of gameplay and not whether you can read tiny subtitles. Here I have drawn what I consider to be a misconception of the flow model applied to disabled players as well as its reality. Rather than flattening the flow model, accessibility simply means adding accommodations. The first graph is still absolutely a valid way to play games, rather the point here is to illustrate that it is not the only way to think about accessibility. The second graph is intended to be a replica of Chen's flow model with my addition of accommodations. The idea of the challenge is still preserved. There are just more ways to balance it outside of the player's own ability. Chris Taylor describes this concept well in his letter called Dear Industry within the Includification booklet. Quote, "What if the greatest book ever written was not available to everyone? What if we neglected to translate the text into multiple languages? Accessibility isn't about changing the content of the book, it's about changing the delivery. While there is no way to make the book available to absolutely everyone, we can make as many versions available as possible to make sure that almost everyone can enjoy it." End quote. So rather than thinking about difficulty or game mechanics as content, we should conceptualize them as the delivery of the game. Accessibility is also not about having a singular version of a book or game that is universal, and rather allowing for everyone to have a personalized copy. It is important to emphasize that accessible games are not inherently easier games, as generally speaking, players enjoy being challenged. Instead, it is useful to frame discussions within accommodations as a way to fine-tune flow models among disabled players. Terraria. As we look at Terraria specifically, I will be basing my comments on the Able Gamers Includification booklet and the website Taming Gaming or Family Gaming Database, as they both have comprehensive guides and accessibility criteria. I will be going through a lot of their accessibility guidelines, but not all, simply because not all of them are applicable to Terraria. I will also be including comments and suggestions made by other players from the Terraria forums and Reddit. I have done my best to be as thorough as possible, but I may have missed aspects that are absolutely essential to you. If I have missed something that's important to you, please say so. It doesn't have to be relevant to everyone. If it matters to you as a disabled gamer, or just in general, it's important and valid, so please share it. As mentioned in the beginning, you can make a comment in the forum for disability accessibility suggestions, or also feel free to make your own forum, a Reddit post, or a tweet tagging Redigit, as those are all other ways that you can gain visibility as well. Note, I am a PC player, so I am offering nothing regarding console and mobile, though there is of course a lot of crossover. If you fall into either of those categories, please share your experience because it's just as important and valid. I just personally have nothing to contribute specifically about those platforms. The main broad categories of accessibility include mobility, visual, hearing, and cognitive. I will also be talking about language as a separate area. I will be going in order of the checklists, emphasizing areas where steps need to be taken, and also explicitly pointing out accessibility options Terraria already has, because there are a lot, which is awesome. And this is what I mean when I say that accessibility is good for everyone, because you are already benefiting from a lot of it without even knowing. Before going into each section, I want to say that one of my favorite things about Terraria is the extremely open flexibility in playstyles, from hardcore to classic characters, weapon choices, and even which bosses to fight. If a weapon or non-essential boss fight causes certain complications or sensory issues, the player can simply avoid them. It is amazing that this flexibility is already part of the game experience, and I want to celebrate it specifically, especially since it allows players to accommodate themselves in very natural and non-judgmental ways. I also want to say explicitly that Terraria has good game design, a lot of which is already accessible simply by virtue of being good game design. So whenever I critique a feature, I am not saying that it is bad design, but rather that on top of the existing good design, we can add explicitly accommodating features. Mobility. Mobility refers to the physical capacity of the player. We can help people who have severe joint pain, limb differences, or a temporarily broken arm by having accessible mobility options. Terraria actually provides a lot of them already, so let's go through them. Remappable keys? Yes. On-screen keyboard functions properly? Don't know. No button mashing? Yes, especially with auto-fire. No precision needed? Yes. Can play with only the mouse? Not really. Can play with only the keyboard? Kind of. Can move user interface elements? Kind of. No mandatory quick time events? Somewhat. Timing of movement or button pressing not important? Yes. Difficulty levels? Yes. As you can see, Terraria fully accomplishes 5 out of the 10 major mobility options, with 4 options that are unclear. I have highlighted and bolded remappable keys and difficulty levels as 2 things that most, if not all, able-bodied players automatically make use of. I personally have a Comac keyboard and not QWERTY, so I remap all my keys. Players may also have different preferences for key bindings. I, for one, straight up unbound the throw key because there has not been a single occasion in my life where I pressed the throw key intentionally. To expand on key bindings, as suggested by my friend Fighter, the option to add dash to a key binding rather than double tapping would be really helpful, especially for those of us that accidentally hurl ourselves off of platforms when constructing arenas. The use of the smart cursor and auto fire are not just convenient, but are also great for accessibility. Basically, these options check off button meshing, precision, and timing of button pressing. Not having to press a button every time you want to fire a bullet or swing a sword is a lifesaver for everyone's joints, disabled or not. I can tell you that the second I get feral claws, I never unequip them unless I'm either reforging or combining them. It is the most literal quality of life improvement out there, which is why it's fantastic that there is an auto fire setting which works for all weapon types. The smart cursor eliminates the need for precision for those who find such a thing impossible, or when I'm too lazy to mine efficiently. In addition, as stated by Rabbit Birthday in the Terraria forums, auto-aiming capabilities can be improved, which would help players with low mobility as well as those who are visually impaired. So I hope that you are starting to see how accessibility options help everyone out, because a lot of the time they really do double as convenient or general quality of life improvements. Journey mode should also have a knockback toggle for those who need it without having to turn on God mode for straight up invincibility. As suggested by Shalala in the forums, an auto jump setting that automatically traverses short walls would help those with mobility or dexterity issues. To expand upon can move user interface elements, there is some flexibility already with UI scaling and being able to change the map type, but it would be great if players could move around element placement. Someone with limited mobility may find it easier to have armor and accessory slots next to the inventory instead of on the other side of the screen. For the option can play with only a keyboard, I think it's possible if someone has a programmable mechanical keyboard, as there are configurations that emulate mouse movement and clicking with key presses, but since most keyboards are not programmable, I am leaving this as a kind of. For the option can play with only a mouse, you can do everything with the mouse other than move. You can even scroll through your hotbar rather than pressing number keys. However, because there is no viable way to move around other than using the endgame round of Harmony, this accessibility feature is not yet available. I know that there are some people who have tried out playthroughs like this, which was started by Terrasteel on YouTube, but I'm not going to say that it's actually accessible, because the kind of person who can only use a mouse is probably not the kind of person who can place and click on minecarts and chairs constantly with precision. If Terraria implemented the possibility for on-screen controls, similar to mobile, that a person can click on, this would be a lot more accessible. I also want to point out here that we are fascinated and engaged with content that centers around accessibility. We just don't know that's what it actually is. This topic of playing with only a mouse has gotten a ton of attention, and people have contributed in innovative ways. We are making Terraria more accessible entirely accidentally. Imagine how much can happen if we do it on purpose. For a similar example to ways people push boundaries, there are a ton of videos centered on whether games can be played 100% blind. My pet cactus on YouTube beat Hollow Knight blindfolded, which is absolutely insane. But what's crazy to me, though, is not just the skill involved that needs to be applauded in of itself, but how close the game actually is to being blind accessible without even realizing it. I know in my heart that one day someone will beat Terraria blindfolded. It will definitely require mods, but it will happen because people love pushing themselves in crazy ways. I just hope that it will be done in a way that doesn't just show off skill and grit, but opens the door for the blind community to participate in ways that weren't previously possible. I specifically love that Terraria has separate world and player difficulty setups. This allows for a ton of flexibility in playstyle. If you want a chill time, you can play a classic character on a classic world, and if you're batshit insane, you can play a hardcore character on legendary difficulty in the hell of the Get Fixed Boys seed, which was done first by Sorbet Cafe on YouTube. Journey mode has got to be one of the best accessibility modes ever. The fact that a player can be invincible and also fight master mode enemies is incredible. I have seen players use Journey mode simply for its time skipping capacity for fishing quests in an otherwise master mode playthrough. I use Journey mode when I do builds by turning off spawns completely and freezing time. To relate this directly to the flow model, a disabled player might find the mechanical bosses impossible in the time given from the night to day cycle and difficult when time is frozen, which gives them more time. And notice that I said difficult as opposed to impossible and not easy as opposed to difficult. Having easy difficulties and invincibility options does not limit challenge. It opens the door for more people to challenge themselves when the game would have otherwise been impossible. We love it when games introduce masochistic difficulty levels because we recognize that there is a player base that wants a greater challenge. So let's be kind to the player base that equally wants to be challenged but simply needs accommodations to make that possible. And I say all of this as someone who has literally spent more time to beat Get Fixed Boy on legendary difficulty than on my journey mode character where I set off to collect literally every single item in the game. If someone wants to play in the easiest way possible for no good reason other than they want to, let them. People chilling out and taking it easy doesn't undermine your own achievements. And because they come into the game with a chill attitude, they might even end up playing more than some hardcore players because they don't have a strict mindset on what fun means. I want to take a moment to expand on how existing playstyle can allow players to accommodate their own mobility needs. The variety of accessories, mounts, potions, grappling hooks, as well as pylons are all fantastic ways that players can independently manage how they want to traverse the world. Class builds also influence how players move when fighting, from a potentially more static ranger or mage to a dynamic and dashing melee or whip-using summoner player. Features like this are the most fun and dynamic way to incorporate accessibility. And once again, take note how regular gameplay can double as accessibility elements without even realizing. Visual. Visual refers to the player's ability to see, whether that is someone with poor vision, color blindness, or light sensitivities. Going through the checklist, we have: no key elements of the game are identified by red and green. No. Colorblind options are present or not needed. No. Font color can be changed. No. Font size or type can be changed. No. Game presented in high contrast. Mostly. Subtitles are easy to read. I think so. Subtitles are letterboxed. Some. Game menus are easy to see, read, and use. I think so. Game map is visible and can change size. Yes. Outline interactive elements. Yes. No busy backgrounds or can be turned off. Yes. Large game elements or elements can be made larger with zoom. Yes. No flashes or flashes can be disabled. No. No screen shake or can be turned off. No. Violence, gore and limb dismemberment can be turned off. Yes. Minimal to moderate reading required. Somewhat. Game speed can be changed. No. Cursor color and size can be changed. Mostly. Of the 18 visual accessibility options, Terraria definitely gets 5 of them right, and potentially kind of another 7. Players with color blindness can have issues with distinguishing between some ore types, as discussed by Bulo in the forums, who has protanopia and finds it hard to distinguish between copper and palladium. Gems are also hard to distinguish between, and even though you can hover over item names in your inventory, it's still annoying to waste time mining something that you didn't want. In addition, another complication, which is also very ironic, is that the hunter potion makes friendly entities green and enemies red, which if you have the most common red-green color blindness, protanopia or deuteranopia, both will look the same. An easy fix would be an option to configure it to blue and yellow, or pink and blue for tritanopia, or something custom. Being able to change the font color, type, and size should hopefully be fairly straightforward to implement. My impression is that the font is Comic Sans-esque, meaning it's likely dyslexic friendly, but this is still an area that can definitely be improved in terms of accessibility. I cannot personally comment on how easy the menus are to read and use, though I did notice that you cannot change the UI scale in the main menu and only within a world, so it would be good to allow people to change the scale of the UI upon opening the game. Terraria has pretty good contrast by default, but we can make it even better. As an example, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart has a high contrast mode, and so basically we could add in a mode that is a permanent hunter and danger sense potion, where friendly and important elements are the same bright color, enemies in danger are another color, and the background can be made dull as needed, and potentially a form of the Spelunker potion that highlights ore in your current area, so you'd see lit up ore in your current cavern, but not treasure in the corner of your screen that's behind stone. I highlighted and bolded game map is visible because I know that most, if not all of us, love the game map. I love as well that it can be toggled to another mode or even removed. I straight up would not play Terraria without the map. It's literally why I don't play Minecraft, because there's no map. I get my right and left confused all the time, and so I get lost so easily. Wayward Compass is obviously S tier in Hollow Knight, and I don't even think I can blame this on my autism. I'm just god awful at directions. So I just want to emphasize once again that the map is yet another convenient quality of life feature that also doubles as an accessibility option. Being able to outline interactive elements is similarly essential. Items that can be interacted with have a duplicate image that appears when hovering over them, or text if they have been labeled. This is even more true with the smart cursor highlighting things in yellow. It's just a great feature. I also want to emphasize the ability to toggle off backgrounds. This isn't just helpful for increasing contrast, but for allowing shitty computers to run the game. You know who you are, you Mac users, with both a fan underneath the laptop and another fan pointed at the laptop, with each fan flashing red or blue so it looks like someone called an ambulance on your desk for your poor dying MacBook. You know who you are, as in me from 3 years ago, who also played using a trackpad and not a mouse like an absolute chaotic bastard. But I must note that when the backgrounds are toggled off, they should be more neutral. When you're in hell, there is still a ton of detail in the turned off background, which doesn't necessarily help with contrast. And likewise, being able to change the brightness of backgrounds would be helpful for players with photosensitivity, as detailed in Rabid Birthday's forum. The most personally relevant feature that Terraria is currently missing is the ability to turn off screen shake and flashes. Because of my autism, I cannot handle flashing lights. It's not a preference thing. I'm not saying that flashing lights are just mildly annoying, but that my brain physically doesn't process flashing lights properly. For an analogy that's probably more relatable, you know those awful sounds like styrofoam rubbing together, or fire alarms, or that high-pitched tone people play to torture teenagers? That's how flashing lights feel for me. They aren't just annoying, they are physically unbearable. And for people with photosensitive epilepsy, flashing lights are not just unbearable, but dangerous. I tried to do research if anyone had gotten a seizure from playing Terraria, and I couldn't find anything, so let's try to keep it that way. Flashing lights can also trigger severe migraines in some people, so in general, let's make sure to accommodate for photosensitivity because it can affect all sorts of conditions. Flashing light is also not always as obvious as you might expect. Cuphead has caused seizures suspected by both the flashing game attacks and film grain effect. Tara B. Welch made a forum where they shared concerns about thunderstorm lightning, especially when sleeping in a bed that makes the screen flicker faster and more frequently during a storm. So in addition to being able to turn off the thunderstorm lightning, I propose a still background for hell as an option when turning backgrounds off, since the low-res version still flickers. The loading screen should have a static option, which was also mentioned by Tara B. Welch. The way wings activate when walking down slopes needs to be reevaluated, as they constantly flash on and off even if you cosmetically have them turned off. The screen shake before the Moonlord fight should have a toggle option for those who need it, and the whole fight is actually full of shaking effects and begins and ends with a full white screen flash. The color changes during the fight may also present difficulties for visually impaired players, so there should be a toggle to turn off all associated effects for this boss. So I suggest a photosensitivity mode that gives warnings in the descriptions of potentially triggering items, such as the Lunar Portal Staff, Arcane Rune Wall, Last Prism, Rune Hat, and Rune Robe, leaving Rainbow Die, as well as a warning before the Empress of Light fight. A setting that changes the appearance of their particle effects to be less bright could also work here. The setting would also remove other flashes, such as those from the teleporter and lava. Another setting with reduced particle effects would also be helpful and would include things such as less or no sparkle on gold items and crystals, and less particle effects from using the Rod of Discord. For those who want slower game speeds, doing multiplayer on a MacBook is an excellent method. But for real, there should be an option for this, similar to how frame rate can be adjusted for machine performance. Not present in the includification booklet or family gaming database, but something that was mentioned by user BH5432 in the forums, is to be able to change the size of the cursor. Currently, the UI scaling also increases the cursor size, so these settings should simply be separate. It would also be great to be able to disable the pulsating effect of the cursor. I went to the workshop to see if I could find a non-pulsating cursor, but everything I tried simply changed the shape with no option to stop the pulsating effect. So I currently have a black cursor because using color means that in addition to pulsating, the color also changes in saturation, which is just too much for my wonky ass brain to handle. And what's interesting here is that the default pulsating effect is actually fantastic for visually impaired players to be able to locate the cursor with greater ease, but at the same time can be overstimulating with those who have light sensitivities. And this is not to complain, but the opposite, as the default pulsating cursor is literally already accommodating for some people, which is wonderful. Let's just make it accommodating for even more people with the option to toggle it. In addition, as stated by MKBoy501 in the forums, there needs to be an option to highlight projectiles. Another addition from a forum by Ichi is to have a highlight system in the inventory for visually impaired players to better find and manage items. The easiest fix would probably be a toggle that simply permanently enables the auto-sorting colors, as suggested by Eustace CS in that same thread. Hearing. Hearing refers to the player's hearing capacity, which includes noise sensitivities. Going through the checklist we have, ambient noise is included, yes. All audio cues are accompanied by visual cues, yes. Game can be successfully completed without sound, yes. Audio and music can be adjusted separately, yes. Terraria already has fully accessible audio in terms of the basic checklists, which is fantastic. However, more can be done to assist deaf and hard of hearing players via the use of subtitles or captions. Monolith mentioned in my forum that Minecraft has a great subtitle system that we can take inspiration from, and suggested that there can also be particle effects or animations for important sounds. Ethan too commented in my forum with similar suggestions and gave an example of what an expert mode Eye of Cthulhu fight might look like with subtitles. There is also more that can be done for those with noise sensitivities. Leafin made a Terraria forum post discussing 3 potential additional audio settings. Taken directly from their post, they say, quote, player noise. This consists of any noises from weapons, tools, mounts, and equipment. For anyone sensitive to some of the noises their weapons make, or wanting to tone down the sound of mining when doing a big dig, or just wanting to bounce around in a minecart in silence, this would be for them. NPC sounds. This consists of sounds from town NPCs and mobs. This would be more useful for players who find some of the mob sounds a bit uncomfortable or ear-piercing, or help when nearby there's a mob grinder, especially if rapid hits are involved, which can cause many ear-piercing noises that more sensitive people cannot deal with. Wiring sounds. This consists of sounds from timers, teleporters, logic sensors, pressure plates, and announcement boxes, especially announcement boxes, not switches, as those are directly interacted with by the player. I've mentioned before, this would not only be immensely useful for noise-sensitive players, as complex wiring can be extremely clicky, but this would also be huge for maps as well, since any unique and interesting mechanics seem to make the most clicking noises out of anything." End quote. They really emphasize the importance of being able to toggle wiring sounds, as it does really get overwhelming very quickly, and I fully support the idea that it breaks immersion as well, especially if you have a fantasy build utilizing magic, but it's powered by all these mechanical clicking sounds. Cognitive. Cognitive refers to the player's cognitive limitations and game experience. The checklist includes tutorials, yes, with the guide, reaction time not critical, yes, in journey mode, low pressure, yes, in journey mode, no jump scares or can be turned off, no, guaranteed progress with God mode, yes, with journey mode, save progress anytime, yes. The more complex a game is, the more likely it will have a tutorial to get players eased into the game, unless it's Rain World, which won't teach you shit. In Rain World, you'll flounder around like the literal slug you are and die without having any idea you can do actual backflips. Now, the fun thing about Terraria is that the guide, who we love to meme about murdering and sacrificing, is actually a brilliant implementation of a tutorial or help. If you want help, you can literally ask for help when talking to the guide, and if you don't need help, you can murder him. The ability to look up recipe crafting is also fantastic, especially when your internet fails before you preloaded all 60 Terraria wiki pages on potions. In general, I would say that reaction time is not critical, as even if you get hit, you usually don't die instantly. In journey mode, reaction time is not necessary at all if God mode is turned on, and the game pressure also decreases similarly. In addition, Terraria has an auto-pause feature that can be toggled, where the game pauses when your inventory is open. This is great for lowering pressure and giving people more time to react, especially during events where there are a lot of enemies on screen. Auto-pause is also helpful for hardcore players who now have time to decide whether they will let the boulder fall and kill them when they unpause, or will save and exit. Another component for reaction time, as suggested by Shalala in the forums, would be to add a setting that slows down messages in multiplayer chats so players have more time to read and react. I would say that most, if not all, jump scares come from traps killing you instantly, so an actual no trap seed with no traps instead of more traps would be the easiest way to accommodate for this. I want to add that there are players with severe arachnophobia who avoid spider caves unless they really, really want to get the stylist, so having the option to toggle spider appearance or seeds that remove them altogether would help out a lot. For those on PC, user MG Eggroll has made a texture pack that changes spiders and insects, and user AC Bob made a texture pack that changes all spiders to lobsters. It's pretty charming, I recommend checking it out. There is also a texture pack by DK for trypophobia, and another potential jump scare would be the sudden appearance of some bosses and enemies if not summoned intentionally, such as Queen Bee, Empress of Light, Wall of Flesh, and the Dungeon Guardian, so a warning or option to forgo the fight could mitigate this. I think we all love that you can save progress at any point. It's actually quite smart that you always start from spawn or your bed and bosses despawn, so saving isn't exploited as a way to avoid death and resume from exactly where you were. Making Terraria blind accessible. The point of this section is not to tell the developers to make the game blind accessible right now. I simply want to demonstrate that blind accessibility is possible and is not an impossible pipe dream. When I learned that The Last of Us 2, a 3D shooter, is entirely blind accessible, well, I figured the sky's the limit at this point. Terraria already has a couple of features leaning in the direction of blind accessibility, so we can take them and expand upon them. The one thing that will allow this to be possible is creating screen reading compatibility. Since the game already shows the description text of an item when hovering over it, I imagine that it should not be impossibly far off to have it trigger a screen reader. The cursor already knows what placed items it is hovering over as well. When holding a pickaxe, you can't chop trees, but you can mine ore. I am sure this could be expanded to a verbal description of what the mouse is over. Enemies can either be vocally announced when applicable, or each enemy type can be given a distinct sound cue. Similarly, bosses could audibly telegraph moves. This is actually why it was possible to beat Hollow Knight blindfolded, because the player could react based on sound alone. In addition, as mentioned by Chips Ahoy McCoy, the option to use a more standard font like sans serif or Arial might help screen readers have an easier time depending how they interact with the game. Additional suggestions. No knockback, permanent treasure or mana magnet effect with a long range, a sound or message when inventory is full or an inventory with no limits, announce boss and invasion arrivals audibly, a smart cursor option to select armor and accessories, a voice message on buffs and buff times, same with informational accessories like speed, sound differences between mineable and unmineable blocks. Bosses like Queen Bee and Empress of Light have to be confirmed before appearing in case of accidental summon, reduced or no fall damage, a sound when entering water or lava, or the player doesn't drown or burn to death. The player would definitely have to use the magic storage mod with screen reader capacity so they can actually search for items. And these are just suggestions and ideas off the top of my head. Again, I'm not trying to say that this should be easy, but rather that it is not nearly as impossible as it might seem. People have made literal computers in Terraria. People have made mods that may as well be their own games. The community has shown time and time again that just about anything is possible, which is why I genuinely believe that blind accessibility is possible and will be achieved one day. Let's work together and make Chip Ahoy McCoy's dream come true to play their favorite game once again. Language. Even more so than discussions about difficulty, language is especially controversial. I want to be explicitly clear that I am not claiming that the RE Logic development or marketing teams are ableist, because that simply is not true. The intention of this section is to raise awareness for how we can be more mindful about language. As an example, I spent most of my life not knowing that this is a slur for Romani people. Once I learned that it is, I stopped using it. It's that simple. We make mistakes, we learn, and we move forward. It's honestly super chill. Wraith Pingu made a forum to suggest changing the name of spasmatism because spaz is an ableist slur in the UK. They were very chill and casual with the post, simply pointing out that the team just needs to be aware that in some contexts, spaz is a harmful slur. Another user, Glazier, pointed out that the boss's name is a combination of the words spasm and astigmatism, which is actually listed in the wiki. Retinaser is also a combo of the words retina and laser, so these two bosses were named in a very creative and fun way, with no ill intent at all. To be clear, literally no one is saying that the team did anything bad. To quote Wraith Pingu, I signed up to the forum so I could hopefully give the developers the heads up about an aspect of their game that could be misinterpreted as something I believe is not representative of their core values. End quote. I will say, though, that because of the way spasmatism is structured, I have seen content creators shorten it to spaz or spazzy, which I imagine could potentially be upsetting for disabled viewers in the UK. Again, I am not criticizing content creators who use words without knowing that they are slurs, because that is both stupid and unproductive. And a different topic, not Terraria related, I recently saw a streamer unironically use the word cripple, researched it on the stream to check if it was a slur, saw that it is indeed a slur, and then nonchalantly moved on without apologizing. Even things that we think are obvious to people are not. What matters is what you do after you learn about the context or potential harm of a word. So all I'm trying to do, and all Wraith Pingu was trying to do, is to simply inform the team that in the UK, spaz is a slur. Nothing needs to happen, the team just needs to know, so that going forward, more inclusive decisions can be made. However, the possible name for the cool slime Spazzy should just be taken out. Unlike spasmatism, it's not iconic or historical, so we can just change that one. Another aspect of language I want to bring up is that once we know something is an accessibility feature, we should talk about it in that way. When Journey Mode came out in 2020, God Mode was described like this, quote, God Mode, also sometimes known as Kid Mode, a nice set of training wheels to help new or younger players learn the game. Don't worry, we won't tell anyone when you use it on yourself to get over the tougher challenges. End quote. Now that I have discussed why invincibility is an accessibility feature, we can avoid this type of language in the future. In fact, I've gone over so many already existing accessibility features that the game should explicitly celebrate them. Being upfront about accessibility features should be more common. I learned that Celeste has dedicated accessibility features in a games class, and my professor couldn't figure out how to turn them on initially. I didn't know that The Last of Us 2 is fully blind accessible until I researched it for my class paper. I didn't know that Terraria had so many accessibility features by default. These things are awesome, so we should talk about them more. Fun stuff. This was not originally included in the paper, but I came back to it and added some things that I think could be fun gameplay modes or items that are disability related, but not necessarily actual accessibility features. Impaired vision mode. You have a small radius around you of what is visible, and everything beyond that is pitch black. CJ Deathbot made a video playthrough of Terraria zoomed in to an extreme amount, which is similar, so once again, people are already interested in things like this. Wheelchair mount. A wheelchair mount that cannot jump and can only go up on blocks that have been hammered flat or slanted. Additionally, or alternatively, a mount that can automatically traverse terrain without needing to jump as a way to help those with limited mobility. A painting or banner of or related to the disability pride flag would be so cool as a small form of inclusion and recognition. The workshop already has a couple pride flag banners and trans flag projectiles, so someone please do the same for the disability pride flag. Actually, I have gone ahead and made a painting and a piano. If they don't get added to the game, I'll release a texture pack if anyone's interested. Add in an inhaler that gives buffs so I get to be cool in my favorite game when I can't be in real life. The autism experience mode, sensory hell, where everything is brighter, louder, and with more particle effects. You have to answer a quiz before buying items from NPCs because social interactions are hard and confusing. You get overheated or chilled randomly, and also from simply being inside of the desert and snow biomes respectively. You have a special interest in one random item that once collected will permanently occupy the first space in your hotbar. Autism or sensory friendly mode, a preset of settings with a softer color palette and less intense particle effects and sounds. This is probably more fitted for someone to take on as a mod. A service dog pet that occupies the light pet slot and gives you a heart or food item every so often and increases your range of vision in the impaired vision mode. I made a resprite of the puppy pet, which I'm actually proud of. Again, I'll make a texture pack if people want it. Conclusion. I got inspired to make this whole thing because of the 1.4.5 stress ball accessory for auto-attacking, which is accidentally an accessibility feature. And just like the people making a mouse-only playthrough, disabled or not, we're all fascinated by and excited to be engaged with accessibility features. We just haven't explicitly realized that's what they are. We are already doing accessibility on accident. Let's just do it on purpose and make this already incredible game fucking limitless. Thank you and contributions. While I have put a ton of time and effort into this, I have also collected suggestions made by others, and while they have already been mentioned throughout the video, I wanted to make a dedicated section to them. First thing, a huge thank you to Red and the RE Logic team for taking this seriously. I'm so excited to see what you guys do with the plethora of suggestions I have made. From the forums, Rabbit Birthday, Shalala, Bulo, Tara B. Welch, BH5432, MKBoy501, Itchy, Eustace CS, Monolith, Ethan2, Leafin, Wraith Pinger, and Glazier. Honorable mentions from the forums: Dakin Radish, Mojiao, Newbies, Scrub Pleb, Ignis Service, Ambid Mienfu. From the workshop, MG Eggroll, AC Bob, and DK. From Reddit, Chips Ahoy McCoy. And from real life, my friend Fighter on Steam. My brother for not being mad that I paused my part of our video game development to make this. And thank you to my partner for believing in and encouraging me. And finally, thank you for watching. This topic means a lot to me, and I hope that you have something to take away, that you've learned, or you've become inspired to share your own suggestions when you thought that they might not matter or be seen, because it's important. You matter. Yeah, you matter. Bloopers! And the website Taming Gaming or Family Gaming Database. Like the Empress of Light, Queen Bee, Wall of Flesh, and dun. Fuck. It's fun, 'cause it's balloons, and that's how fun works. You were the best 11 seconds of the video, and no one can take that from you. The contenders for the laziest build of the video are this thing, chairs, and literal dirt. The winner is this build that I already made ages ago as a token of love for my partner and just reused for the video.